Well, hi and welcome. I'm Jonathan Foust, and I am so glad that we can spend this time together. But before we dive into this meditation and talk, a few thank yous. First of all, a big thank you to the Insight Meditation community of Washington for streaming this event, to our producer, Glenn Harrison, for making sure it reaches you. Also, a big thanks to Rita Moran, who leads a wonderful mindful movement session every week at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Perfect preparation for this talk at 7:30. You'll find links to her Zoom sessions on my website and on my Facebook page. And I want to share something about these talks, and that is that everything I offer is freely available. There are no ads, no paywalls, nothing you have to sign up for. Discovering these practices and teachings have changed my life, and much, if not most, of what I've received was in the spirit of generosity, in this tradition that no one should ever be denied access. So, if you feel moved to support this work, whether it's once in a while or ongoing, your donations make it possible for me to keep creating and sharing these talks with anyone who might benefit from them. So, with that, let's settle in with a short meditation. Our exploration for this upcoming talk is on true nature. And true nature implies something that is so vast that it requires no effort to get there. That's a little paradoxical, but let's explore a couple of the techniques that can open up this awareness. So you might begin by closing your eyes, and you notice when you close your eyes, awareness of the outside world is diminished, and awareness of the inner world becomes heightened, shifting from the extrinsic stimulation to the intrinsic experience. And take a moment, if you would, to bring your attention to the sound vibrations that are happening right now. And if you would, bring your awareness to wherever you feel the breath the most predominant on the inside right now. And if you would, bring your awareness now into the feeling inside the palms and fingers and thumbs, sensing the hands from the inside out. And here you might relax your palms, relax the fingers and thumbs, and notice what you feel. Maybe some tingling or pulse or vibration or subtle energy. And breath or sound or the felt sense of the hands is all happening now. And you may notice how, when you really experience from the inside, from any one of these touch points or anchors, you are present. This is the starting point for meditation. So, if you would select either sound or breath or the felt sense of the hands, and sense what it's like to maintain attention or concentration, relaxed concentration on one of these points. And when your mind naturally wanders, just bring it back. An interesting element in this stage of practice is the moment you realize that you're lost in thought. Is it possible to notice without any judgment and maybe even a little celebration? You are here, you're awake again. And then to guide your attention back. And this breath or these sounds or this feeling tone in the hands. As you continue to bring your awareness back to the here and now, you may notice that there are some particular streams of phenomena passing through. Sensations are changing, sound, breath, feeling tone inside. The movement of the mind, this constant generation of thoughts. Any play of emotion, of opening or closing of the heart. Even different states will come and go in your practice, yet there's something that is aware. Can you sense that quality of awareness? Some call it the witness, the observer. Some call it open monitoring. Here you might explore what it's like to bring your awareness to your anchor, to the breath or sound or the felt sense, and then to shift your attention to that which is aware. There's kind of a widening of awareness, noticing everything that's changing and sensing this quality of knowing. You may notice that there are different elements of practice. One of them is concentration or paying attention on purpose. It has a willful quality. This breath, these sounds, this feeling in the palms. Here, there is this arriving again and again. Another element of our practice is this quality of observing, the witness, being the open monitor of what's changing. Not trying to control your experience, but simply to be aware. What exactly is happening right now and how is it changing? There's a third quality, a quality of what some might call letting be, or letting go, or surrender. a quality of allowing. And you might explore only if it feels right for you. It's a very intuitive call. What would most benefit you to continue to bring your awareness back and to re-arrive, relax, come into presence? To be the observer of what's changing, or perhaps to let go of all technique and just be. Let everything arise by itself. What feels most nourishing for you in these remaining minutes? You might explore the following questions. Sensing both inside and in the mind, is there anything right now that could let go or soften or relax? Is there anything that could let go, soften, or relax even more than that? You might now deepen your breath, let your body move and adjust as we begin our transition. Feel the space around you. Notice what's shifted, what has changed. And welcome back. All great traditions speak of one essential question. Who are you? Or perhaps, what are you? There's a word is thrown around, or phrase, and that is your true nature. What exactly is your true nature? In the absence of desire, in the absence of aversion, in the absence of confusion, what exactly arises? That is the topic of the following talk, which is from a few years back. What is your true nature? What gets in the way of experiencing your true nature? And how can you cultivate awareness of this primal experience within? I hope you find the following talk helpful. It's great to be with you, and many, many blessings. I have come to really appreciate Pixar movies. Well, one of my favorite movies is Inside Out, which kind of gives voice to the different voices and forces in our heads. And there's another movie that's come out. It's called Soul, and I have not seen it, but I ran across this really cute thing from Diego Atanasio, who's a comedian, I think. And he said, I was watching Pixar's Soul with my 5-year-old nephew, and when they got to the part with the unborn souls and the great before, he said, I remember that place. All the adults just gasped and said, what? And he said, yeah, they showed it in the trailer. I love that story. You know, we're so quick to look for the mystery, the answer, our relationship with the mystery of being alive, like what came before, what comes after. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what it means to be in the mystery. And in particular, with all the crises that are going on these days, it becomes a very powerful question for me. How do I be in the midst of so much turmoil that's happening on the planet right now? Do I serve, or do I savor what I have? And it's a question, I think, for all of us, like, how do I contribute? What's skillful action? And I'd like to talk a little bit about this. How do we tune in to the presence that's beyond the kind of this generalized angst of the mind? Oftentimes it's referred to as finding refuge. In some traditions, it's finding refuge in the heart of Christ, or finding refuge in the heart of Muhammad, or finding refuge in the mystery, or making peace with God. In the Buddhist tradition, it's about like taking refuge in the Buddha of wakefulness, or taking refuge in what's called Buddha nature, or what we can think of as true nature. Like, what is it? What is the primal ground of being that's true? So I'm gonna dive into this because this stuff fascinates me, and I'd like to talk about four things. First of all, what do we really know? Second, well, what is true nature, or at least what is Buddha nature, in this particular tradition? And with this kind of primal quality of being, what gets in the way? How do we screw it up? And a little bit on some doorways to true nature. Like, how do we find our way back? I've told this story before, but I think it's pretty illustrative. So much of our focus is in meditation is on concentration and building present moment awareness, and it's a very, very powerful thing. I remember on on one retreat, I was really trying to rivet my attention on the here and now and develop some of that potency of sustained present moment awareness. So I sort of had this mantra in the back of my head of like, don't forget your anchor, don't forget your anchor, like come back to the breath, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. And toward the end of that meditation, I was getting so frustrated. I just thought, forget the anchor. And I suddenly felt this expansive rush of presence. So there's this really powerful sense of not only expansiveness, but a heightened sense of here and now. And it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I sort of hung out in that quality of sort of like ecstatic, spacious, present that wasn't in any way disassociated. It was very, very alive in the here and now. And just loved that experience. It really, really quite blissful. And I found myself in the next meditation, my mind was saying, don't forget to forget your anchor. Don't forget to forget your anchor. Right back to the grasping, right back to the wanting. So we have this deep desire to know what's real. And most of it is about finding happiness on our terms. But I love this story. It was told by William James, and you may be familiar with the story. It's kind of a classic. After a lecture on cosmology and the structure of the solar system, James was accosted by a little old lady. Your theory that the sun is the center of the solar system and the earth is a ball which rotates around it has a very convincing ring to it, Mr. James, but it's wrong. I have a better theory. And what is that, madam? Inquired James politely. That we live on a crust of earth, which is on the back of a giant turtle. Well, not wishing to demolish this absurd little theory by bringing to bear the masses of scientific evidence he had at his command, James decided to gently dissuade his opponent by making her see some of the inadequacies of her position. Well, if your theory is correct, madam, he asked, what does this turtle stand on? She replied, you're a very clever man, Mr. James, and that's a very good question. But I have an answer to it, and it's this. The first turtle stands on the back of a second, far larger turtle who stands directly under him. But what does this second turtle stand on? Persisted James patiently. And to this the little old lady crowed triumphantly, it's no use, Mr. James. It's turtles all the way down. I love how we construct these narratives that make us feel comfortable. Most of our mental design is to try to soothe our anxiety. I remember when I took part in the study on the effect on psilocybin on long-term meditators through Johns Hopkins at the end of a very, very powerful experience, having some very, very powerful insights. At the end, I found myself saying, it's about service. It's all about service. And then there was a pause, and then I just said, and that's just another story. And it was just that glimpse of seeing how that wonderful story, that wonderful narrative I was making around being of service to the world and being service in the face of suffering was a story that I was making up to feel better about myself. It's a great story. Nothing wrong with the story, but it's a story. So the question is, what do you know for sure? What do we know for sure? And if you look through history, the story, the origin stories in different systems, guess how many there are? I'll tell you, a lot. From the Sumerians to the Cherokee, all these different stories of how all this started and what life is all about. And then based on these different origin stories, we have the fundamentalists who coalesce around a particular approach and take the basic assumption that if you disagree with me, you're my enemy, all the way to the mystics, to those who somehow have a capacity to move more into the empirical, more into the feeling element of the origin stories, the more embodied places where all systems can merge. And as we all know, so many people over the eons have been slaughtered in the name of these origin stories. It's impossible to say how many. So when we turn our attention toward what do we really know to be true, we're swimming against a lot of accumulated narratives in humanity. So how do we develop understanding around reality and kind of a faith in reality? And there's a beautiful teaching here, just to mention it briefly, that the cultivation of faith becomes a very powerful inquiry. Because on the one hand, we have sort of like magical thinking, or what we call blind faith. Just tell me what to believe, and I'll believe it so I belong to this tribe. All the way to what we call mature faith or verified faith, where you hear something and then you directly and rigorously apply it to find out if it's true. And that's what, in this tradition, what the Buddha pointed toward was where he would say, don't believe a word of what I'm telling you. You need to verify this for yourself. When we do that, there's the possibility of coming into greater and greater contact with what is perennially true. That is to say, what was true thousands of years ago and what will be true in thousands of years from now. But it's fraught with danger because there's lots of confusion when we look at different systems. A lot of different systems around morality, a lot of different systems around rules. And the question becomes, well, what do the great sages, what do the great beings say about true nature, or what we might think of as Buddha nature? And in the face of that complexity, there's a beautiful story called the Flower Sermon from the Buddha's days. When he was giving a talk to all of his kind of assembled students, and he simply held up a white flower in silence and just sat there. And the story goes that no one understood other than Mahakasyapa, I think I pronounced that right, who smiled. And he saw in that moment that the true form of the formless doesn't rest in letters or words, but it's a transmission from outside the scriptures. It's beyond words. It's beyond the mind. That's a kind of a beautiful Zen moment of just holding a flower and holding the space and letting that be its own transmission. So I've thought, when I'm at a loss for a Dharma topic, or when I can't think of anything to say, that, maybe I would just, pick up my pen and hold it and give that about 45 minutes. So if that happens in the future, just know that I'm offering a transmission beyond words. So you can do a way deep dive into a more scholarly investigation of what Buddha nature means. There are a lot of different systems that expound on it, and it's fascinating. And kind of researching this talk, I looked up Buddha nature on Wikipedia. Oh my gosh, I was so amazed to see how many schools, how many traditions, how many movements over the last 2,500 years have worked to kind of create find the words that can describe something that is essentially wordless. And how different schools would react to other schools, and different movements would arise that would interpret a certain way. And I thought, well, maybe I can sort of like offer a talk sort of like tracking the kind of the shifting language around trying to articulate Buddha nature. And I quickly realized that's kind of beyond I think maybe anyone's interest, and certainly beyond my mental faculties. So in looking at some of these interpretations of different systems over the centuries, there are a few words that did show up of how just true nature or Buddha nature is a foundation. It's like it's the very, very foundation and essence. How it's tied into a quality of luminosity. That is to say, like that quality of primal awareness it's got a quality of luminosity about it. It's got a quality of wisdom, a quality of compassion. It's been described as one bright pearl where the all melts into a single whole. It's referred to as a quality that is unborn, that it's undying, that it's wishlessness. That is to say, it exists only in the absence of any desire. And what is maybe one of these beautiful contrasts that make up this sense of oneness is this sense of both emptiness, utterly empty, but at the same time luminous. An empty luminosity. You might just take a moment. Can you imagine that quality of empty luminosity? So I thought I might offer just a little reflection into this quality of Buddha nature, if you like. So if you like, you can close your eyes. And you might let yourself sit upright but relaxed at the same time. And if you would, let your awareness expand into the senses. Notice the sounds. Notice the perception of touch, externally, internally. Taste and smell. Perception of light or vision. And imagine, if you would, these senses are wide open. The doors are wide open. And let your breath be effortless. There's no control of the breath here. Just the senses wide open. Now, is it possible to notice that which is observing the senses? Can you imagine this knowing quality of awareness that knows it is experiencing these senses right now? And can you imagine this knowing, observing quality of consciousness also including emotions and moods and thoughts? And can you sense how this knowing quality of awareness does not have a location? And can you expand beyond any particular experience and just rest in this knowing quality of mind itself? Can you imagine that no matter what comes or goes, this knowing quality remains? Everything changes. Things fall apart, but awareness cannot fall apart. Awareness cannot die. It can't be stopped. It's unborn. It's always with you. Can you, over the next minute, just sense what it's like to trust this quality of unchanging awareness? You might gently deepen the breath. If you like, you can open your eyes or feel free to remain with them closed. Language can never seem to describe this quality of presence because it truly transcends language. Rumi said, "I'm a spark from the infinite." I love that line. That who you are is truly kind of a hologram. You're aware of all that's moving and changing, and yet you are this unchanging quality of awareness. So there's something here about this quality of kind of desireless, unborn, undying presence that suggests that the only way to arrive is to release, to let go. And T.S. Eliot said so beautifully of how, like, the cost of entry is, it's costing not less than everything. That is to say, all effort, all identification, and any sense of self falls away if we are to merge or sense this quality of consciousness or presence. A great analogy is to think of the sky. The Buddha taught that basically human nature is pure, but it's also egoless. So human nature in essence has no ego. Just as the sky is by nature clear and not cloudy, the clouds come and go, but the sky is always there. The clouds do not alter the fundamental nature of the sky. And in the same way, the human mind is fundamentally pure. Sensitive, delicate, esoteric stuff. But I am pretty sure that you have experienced places of of choiceless presence, moments of being utterly without desire, moments when you have felt utterly and deeply present to what's changing, but also just sensing the field in which all things change. And so I think it's helpful to look at what is it that gets in the way of Buddha nature. One of my favorite stories is the story of a man who's in a hospital bed, and his wife is sitting next to him, and he's all beaten up and feeling terrible, and she's there by his side. And he said, I just realized, you were there when I fell off the roof cleaning the gutters, and you were there that time when I lost my job and I had to start over, and and you were there when I ran off the road and hit that tree and had that horrible accident, and it's just now occurring to me. You're bad luck. So there's always that question of who's always there when things go off? Chances are it's you. Someone was saying I finally realized what is the one constant thing with every relationship that falls apart? It's me. So in the absence of me, things really get pretty interesting. And this becomes a really integral part of this practice when, again, we're talking about the kind of the hardcore teachings here. When the Buddha said, nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. And you try that on, and we'll try that on in a meditation in just a few minutes. In the absence of I and mine, what is left? It's where there's a sense of self and the sense of doing, where we coalesce, where we tighten up. In the Buddhist tradition, there's a verb called selfing. That is when you're acting from that place of self, which usually has to do with self-preservation. It usually has to do with avoiding domination, or it has to do with dominating someone else. And so when we talk about this pearl where the all are merged into one, there's a phrase, I think, from Zen that says it moves from 1 to 2 to 10,000. This fracturing of one mind creates a seemingly endless broken mirror of different images of ourselves. So the teachings, at least in this tradition, point back toward what is required to come back to that sense of oneness. The third Zen patriarch, one of my favorite writers, teachers, said to set up what you like against what you don't like is a disease of the mind. To set up what you like against what you don't like is a disease of the mind. I get it. But it also brings up the question, then how are we all supposed to drive cars together at the same time? How are we supposed to do business together, given this? And this, of course, becomes a very interesting dance of what we call sort of like the absolute self, or the absolute not self, and then relative self. Yes, we are born out of causes and conditions. Yes, we have preferences. Yes, we're kind of purifying our desires as we move through life. And from time to time, we have these moments when we touch into preferenceless awareness, where we can sense who we are without desire. And my sense is that, at least in my life, when I have those moments of simply resting in presence without desire, that's kind of like filters through everything. it dramatically informs the rest of my activity. I become more aware of how driven I am by my preferences and the trouble I get into when I'm caught in a self and doing. That's why so many people, when they begin a meditation practice, find their life starts changing, because their fears don't quite have the grip they had before, and their desires don't quite have the lure that they had before either. It's a transformational practice. So when it comes to cultivating our capacity to rest in true nature or Buddha nature, there's some very powerful practices that kind of allow us to do that. And many people, when they begin meditation, have this sense like it's about watching the breath. That's the practice. And it's very helpful to choose an anchor and develop concentration and begin to train this ADD mind to be more and more here. There's a power that comes through cultivating presence. There's a power that comes from learning how to observe without reacting, how to begin to respond to life. The whole mindfulness wave around the planet is all about learning how to tune in more and more to the sense of preference-less awareness, where you can be the observer, where you can begin to see your reactive patterns and the possibility of responding to life rather than reacting to life. And there's also these practices of stepping back even more. A story which I've told before. Living on a farm in the Midwest, I was going through college, a 1,000-acre farm, and being the livestock manager and running big equipment. It was a blast, and we were all meditators, working on a piece of equipment, and so frustrated. I could not figure out how to set up this particular machine with all the belts and pulleys and stuff like that. And I noticed it was time for meditation. So when I was doing transcendental meditation back then, and 20 minutes twice a day, I went to the cab of the pickup truck and sat for 20 minutes. I came back, instantly saw the problem, instantly saw how to fix this thing. And I realized I could have spent 6 hours wrestling this issue. But because I paused and stepped back, I could see more clearly. So on a relative basis, there's tremendous power in stepping back, because it'll help you to see more clearly. It'll help you to kind of navigate your path with more clarity. But there's also something about stepping back even more into this sense of really sensing what is this primal field we're inhabiting here. And so, just as T.S. Eliot was saying, like, the cost of entry is nothing less than everything, a really powerful teaching in this stuff is that it's not about adding anything. This practice of opening into Buddha nature or true nature is not about piling on more. It's all about letting go. It's all about letting things fall away. And so there's some really interesting little things to explore. And I find this powerful. Not everyone finds this little practice helpful, but it's sort of sensing who you are in the absence of. So I'd like to lead just a little meditation here. We have a little more time here. If you like, you can close your eyes and you might deepen the breath. And then soften the breath. And this is sort of like an imagining practice. Can you imagine what your life experience would be in the absence of sight? Could you imagine what your life would be like in the absence of hearing, in the absence of sound? Could you imagine the absence of taste and smell? Can you imagine what your life would be like in the absence of touch? Can you imagine what your life would be like in the absence of greed? Can you imagine what your life would be like in the absence of hatred, of judgment or blame? Can you imagine what your life would be like in the absence of confusion? Can you imagine taking the next few moments to simply rest in this quality of allowing things to be as they are? If you like, you can deepen your breath. Yoga speaks of all these paths to union. The word yoga means union. And one is the path of service, of losing yourself in service to others. Another is losing yourself through just pure devotion, finding something formless or form and devote yourself to it fully. Another is to explore purifying the body so the energy flows utterly free and unrestricted. Another is to purify the mind, to train the mind to focus on the formless, on true nature, and sort of lose the self in that discipline. And each of these are powerful paths, and said that it's very, very helpful to explore these different traditions, find what resonates for you, and then give yourself to that path, whether it be the path of the service, the path of devotion, the path of energy, the path of purifying the mind, aligning the mind with truth. Another is the path of surrender, of just utterly surrendering to what is. When Tara and I met, now many, many years ago, we had kind of a torrid email romance for many months, and then it amped up, and we moved to instant messaging. And as we were going back and forth in an instant message, she sent me this message. What is the difference between your existence and the existence of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess game with God, and that the beloved has made such a fantastic move that the saint is now continually tripping over with joy and bursting out in laughter and saying, "I surrender." Whereas, my dear, I'm afraid you still think you have 1,000 serious moves. She didn't tell me that those words were from Rumi, and I thought that she was writing those words directly to me, which really took me aback. I thought, wow, that's a little forward to tell me directly that I think I have 1,000 serious moves. But it's so true. Tuning into true nature is a challenging practice. What is this primal field that we're living in? The classic story of two little fish are swimming out to sea, and a big fish is coming in towards shore. And the big fish says, "Morning, boys. Great water." And one little fish says to the other one, like, "What the heck is water? We don't see because we're in it." So reflecting on these paths, on how to open yourself to the mystery, is incredibly powerful. And whereas we think we still have 1,000 serious moves, to move into that state of luminosity, of wisdom, of presence, of the pearl where they all merge into one, we have to let go. It truly costs us not less than everything. Someone once said, "Now and then it's good to pause in the pursuit of happiness and just be happy." What a radical practice. So I'd like to end this with a reading from a good friend of mine. If you're not familiar with Dana Falls, she is such a exquisite poet. And we'll take just a few minutes before we close. The title of this poem is called "Awakening Now." So if you like, you might close your eyes. You might just sense the breath. And sense these two fundamental elements. This element of doing, and this element of utterly, deeply being. Why wait for your awakening? Do you value your reasons for staying small more than the light shining through the open door? Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. Now is the only time you have to be whole. Now. Now is the sole moment that exists to live in the light of your true nature. Perfection is not a prerequisite for anything but pain. Please, oh please, don't continue to believe in your stories of deficiency and failure. This is the day of your awakening. In these final moments, you might reflect on the following questions. Is there anything right now that could relax or soften or let go? Is there anything right now that could soften or relax or let go even more than that? As you sense what is changing right now, is there anything now that you can sense that doesn't change? In these final moments, you might sense or imagine the spaciousness right now, the space beyond the furthest stars, the space inside your body. you might sense that space is limitless. And there is another quality of immeasurable presence, which is this presence of kindness, of compassion, of joy, a steadiness of being. And you might imagine, just in these final moments, the space beyond the furthest stars, the space inside, filled and permeated with kindness, compassion, and loving presence. And over the next 3 breaths, how much more intimately can you feel and relax and sense this quality of presence? And as you're ready, you might gently begin to lengthen and deepen the breath. And as you're ready, if you like, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention, for your presence. May you and your Buddha nature have a wonderful time together. Thank you so much. I look forward to sharing more down the road, and blessings in your practice and blessings in your journey.